Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Well, again, I don't think it works because you can still have an omnipotent God and just say, well, he can limit himself. So he could make himself not omnipotent in the future. He won't. And so no problem. So all he has to do is say he gives his omnipotence to a different object. Or yeah,
okay,
and
but you're clearly very, very smarter than anyone I've ever spoken to about that who's a theist. So no one's ever come up with anything like that. So they normally just get very flustered. It's
I thought you said if he created it, he wouldn't be omnipotent anymore.
right. So like he could give up his omnipotence. So that would be my argument, is that God could give up his omnipotence. He could make something else omnipotent.
Okay.
And then so he would then thereby be creating a rock.
Flawed. The question doesn't really make sense anyway. Itself, it's just.
I don't know. I think it makes sense. I think it's fine.
It's one of the
He could, but he chooses
again,
not
I'm
to.
not belief, obviously.
Yeah, he could, but he chooses not to.
The question completely depends on what you actually believe, to how you actually perceive the question. It's one of those.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
I would think that would.
I prefer the Epicurus quadrilemma. I think that one's a better one.
Yeah, that one's better.
Go on, explain. I've not heard of that.
So, if God is, what is it? I forget what the actual phrasing is. The actual phrasing is better, but it says shows a paradox between God being all powerful and all good. So Epicurus dilemma. Epicurus dilemma. I want to find just the phrasing. Problem of evil. Epicurus dilemma.
I think you could tie in the could, but chooses not to with a different omni property, and they wouldn't work. Then you'd be kind of objecting to another one rather than the one you're trying to debunk, though.
Trilemma, that's what it is. Where is it? Here's a picture.
Is God willing to prevent evil but not willing? Then he is not omnipotent. Is he able but not willing? He is malevolent. Is he both able and willing? Then whence the Is he neither able nor willing? Then why call him God?
Yep, that's the one.
Ooh, I like that.
Yeah, you should. That's the better one instead of the rock.
Fucking hell.
The rock one kind of skirt around.
Who's that? Who's that quote?
Epicurus.
Oh.
Very ancient.
No, I like that a lot.
Very ancient and no good argument against it.
Blows out a lot of arguments out of the water, doesn't it? And it's thousands
I've never heard that before. That's brilliant.
There's another good quote that kind of pairs with this from Marcus Aurelius about living a good life. That's a good one to look up.
Go on.
Yeah, which one is that?
Oh, it just says live a good life. If there are gods and they are just, then they will not care how devout you have been, but will welcome you based on the virtues you have lived. If there are gods, but unjust, then you should not want to worship them. If there are no gods, then you will have lived a noble life.
Ties in Buddhism a little bit. They have similar ideas.
Yeah, I like that. That's to be honest, that's similar with the same sort of ideas. I don't know if you've ever seen Stephen Fry did an interview with an American reporter, and they asked him, the American reporter asked him, if you died and then you actually end up at the pearly gates of heaven, what would you say? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, is how dare you? Both cancer in children. What do you do? Why do you?
Fry has said he
similar
likes
thing.
He's mentioned before that he's a fan of that kind of philosophical thinking. And Stoicism and Marcus Aurelius and Buddhism, they're all very similar in their kind of stoic. It's like life is fucked, the universe is fucked, let's just go have ice cream.
Well, that's it. So when I was saying before about that sort of nihilism or nihilism, when I read up on it, I sort of identified relatively strongly with a lot of the points, because
that's because there's a kind of a dynamic shift that you can create in your head if you acknowledge that.
Yeah,
your
there's nothing.
existence has some sort of innate meaning already, and you didn't give it. Like, there's an advantage to having
Sure.
So if you can wrap your mind around something like existential value, something having a value just because it exists, then, you know, suddenly it's like, okay, sure, your life sucks in every single extent possible. You are alive. And that has
Still
to
makes
mean
sense
something.
though. The actual idea, that like the actual basic premise of the idea still makes sense, because then you're going through, so it's your existence is meaningful. Well, then it's just meaningful because other people, let's say, like, other people love you and things, but that's not in itself a meaning. That's other people giving it a meaning from their own point of view.
And we don't care about their point of view.
Inherently having, it's not inherently having a meaning. It's only them got a meaning because they're giving it a meaning from their own head, and you don't. That isn't inherently meaning in itself.
I didn't choose to view my life with meaning, but apparently I view it with some sort of value, and I'm not choosing.
Well, yeah, that's it. Everyone does, yeah, exactly. Because if you don't, then you may, if you didn't, you may as well just fucking, you'd cross the road without looking and things. You know what I mean? It doesn't make a difference. So,
there's almost a biological argument involved there, because we know that the total cognitive load, 95% of our brain is your subconscious, basically driving everything and keeping you alive. Everything that you think is you is 5%. You are literally a passenger in the backseat of the meat suit, screaming at the driver. Periodically, we'll listen to what you're telling me.
that's it. And I read something the other day that I'd never thought about before, and it was the idea that everything we know about the brain's learned about itself, which is very, very weird, because obviously everything anyone has ever learned is coming from the brain, and everything we know about the brain is, and we've just learned it from, and it's gone. It's very, I can't explain it very well, but it's a very weird concept.
We've never had any knowledge downloaded to our brains.
Yeah.
That ties into what we were talking about earlier with the noumenal and phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything's either conceptual or factual. We don't see any other states of reality. Where went this?
It's like, I don't know, I'm sure you're very aware of this, but it's like that fucking Schrödinger argument. I fucking hate that because it's effectively nonsense.
It's not an argument, that was the problem.
Yeah, it's nonsense, but you can't really disprove it, but it is bollocks. You can't. It's really, really hard to go against.
There's nothing really to disprove there, because you're describing the concept of superposition, not collapse. You know.
But people argue with you. You do need to. You can't go against it without disproving it. But I completely agree with you. The actual concept of it is just completely meaningless. It's nothing.
I hear somebody's TV.
That's mine. That's definitely mine. Turn it down a little bit.
It's why recently I've been watching a decent few horror movies, and I had like a really specific type that I enjoyed, and I didn't realise there was a name for it, and I only found out maybe 6 weeks ago that there was a name for the specific type of horror that I liked, and it's like Lovecraftian horror, or cosmic horror, so it's the idea of like the fear of the unknown. If you actually search on the films and stuff like that, they're fucking brilliant, because it's things that just people have no concept of or can't understand it. It's things that are in different dimensions and things, and it's absolutely fantastic.
They kind of put these fears we have, like ideas, into a fleshy form and name them like old gods. I think that's kind of the goal of them.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly, yeah. It's stuff that just people just don't understand the things that I think is cool. The thing that, to be honest, the film that scared me the most recently was I watched, did you ever watch Don't Look Up with DiCaprio on Netflix?
I scanned through it, I got the idea of it.
Yeah, the ending.
What, was it too scary for you to watch the whole thing through? You said to scan it?
Yeah. It wasn't scary.
So, it's the ending is absolutely horrible. Because they're sat there waiting for a comet to hit the Earth, and then it hits the Earth, and you could hear the fucking like land smashing to bits, and they're just there. The fact that they just sat there around a table waiting to die, and it's that is horrible. I hate it.
What you're doing already.
Well, I watched Chernobyl, that TV show. That one was really good.
That was fantastic. It was very, very good.
Well, it has kind of the same thing though, because they were dying of like.
It is, yeah. Well, yeah, the older people volunteered, didn't they, to go and clean up, so yeah, because they had less life. That was
Yep.
Very interesting. You can go visit actually now. Well, actually, probably not currently.
Not currently.
Maybe like a year ago. Not currently, because the fucking Russians have taken it over.
Well, they still they
year.
recently put on the big giant dome around Chernobyl. The dome that they've been working on for the past like 10 years. But it's still illegal to go into the dome area. I saw a guy called Illegal Freedom, his YouTube channel. He hopped the fence and just walked through Chernobyl and videotaped the whole thing. That was really cool.
Well, you used to be able to, so like a couple of years ago, you used to be able to visit. There were tours around there.
Well, some of the areas you can visit, but the main areas you can't.
Short.
Like some of the areas you can't.
Oh no! Honestly, you can go into all of it. Like you can go into like all the buildings and everything. The half-life of the actual sort of nuclear fallout, the nuclear waste that came out. At the moment now it's gone down that much. Like you obviously can't go into the like the fucking reactor buildings and stuff. But you can go literally around the nuclear plant. It's absolutely fine. It's not a big issue as long as you don't go like fucking once a week. Then it's absolutely fine. The radiation is not strong enough to actually cause any problems.
You should check out the Fukushima cleanup. It was massive. Like all they had to clean up.
It's yeah, no, the only reason I know about Chernobyl is because there's a lady on YouTube I used to watch who was a radiologist. She was like a nuclear physicist, and she used to go to Chernobyl like on a yearly basis and go on around. They'd walk around with like Geiger counters to check the radiation. You can go in most rooms, and it's just the very, very main reactor cores that you can't go in.
If you want to hear an alternate view to nihilism, you should check out Nietzsche. It might be a little bit dense.
I
if
know
you're
who
not
that
familiar. Yeah, you should look into
I'm
that.
very aware who that is. Yeah.
Really get into that if you want to kind of
How
hear.
am I spelling that? Sorry, I'll have a Google. Go on. How am I spelling that?
NICHE, something like that.
NEITZSHTZSHCE. I think I can't spell it out loud.
Yeah, I've got it. I've got it. It's cool.
I prefer moral naturalism.
Yeah, there's that many different points of view. It's like I said, I imagine most people aren't specifically tied down to one though. They're probably spread across a few. So.
Get in my way. I dare you.
The quotes from yeah.
Do you want to give a basic compare and contrast between those two ideas?
Oh, well, nihilism is that
moral
there's
naturalism.
no,
No, not nihilism, like Nietzsche's view. the opposite of nihilism, basically.
I don't.
What he tried to replace it with.
I think he is mostly a nihilist. If God is dead, everything is meaningless.
He just held to the idea that that wasn't the end of the story. He felt that that was the beginning of it. That you needed nihilism in order to have nothing holding you back from building yourself up to a Ubermensch. You needed nothing restrictions. God had to. The problem he also saw was that he thought that people would be able to handle a world without that hand-me-down from religion, without something to replace it already established in the place.
Yeah, he was trying to. He thought denialism was kind of a bad thing that people did have to have something to replace it with. So he tried to make up his own system, which is the Ubermensch. That was his ideal form, I suppose.
He seems to have started as a nihilist, though. From what I'm reading, just online, he seems to have actually started as being. So I just looking at this as a summary. He initiated himself as a nihilist, and we were to believe it took him until 1887 to admit it. He makes the admission that note is more valuable than night shows, and only God and start prove a radical.
Shut down. Your team has destroyed
I mentioned existentialism earlier. That was a Camus. It's a good one to look up if you're interested in that.
I'm not even sure how I define it.
Well, you don't necessarily want to go too down the concept of
destroyed an inhibitor.
You don't have to go down that path. You can still accept the truth that he did manage to discover.
No, I agree with you on that. That's the thing, like, the case could genuinely just be that there is absolutely no meaning to any, and it's all just completely random. All of this philosophy is just complete nonsense.
Shut down.
But we had to talk about it to figure it out.
Well, most philosophers think there is objective value, like meaning and purpose and value. They're atheists, but they still think there is meaning, purpose, and value.
Based on well-being, was incorrect.
No, well-being is not. No one in philosophy. They hate well-being. They hate the well-being idea because it's so not well defined. It is not a popular view.
They just called it eudaimonia back in Grecian days.
The Greekan days.
The Greekan days, lad. The Greekan days. You gotta get back there and do it right.
So what about something like based on our sociality, so like how to best relate to one another, which would of course be predicated on like effective communication and learning about one another.
Well, it depends on what you mean.
The
If you mean
problem with
like,
stuff like that is it ends up going too deep, like, because of what you're saying about relating to one another. A lot of it's defined by different social constructs.
Never too deep.
Where the social constructs come from, you end up going for fucking miles and miles, like people saying, into a rabbit hole. You've got to
well, yeah, that's normally the question: is are these social constructions like subjectivism, or are these caused by some objective feature of the world, like objective?
Yeah, I imagine. Well, most I reckon are social constructions, and almost all.
Yep.
I'm kind of holding myself to the point that since we can see that even single cells are try to move to achieve homeostasis, that principle is just the micro version of what we do in that is that we're key to trying to take care of ourselves. Like, we can't fail as a social species to regulate
But I do want to say that most philosophers are not.
How you
Most philosophers are not social constructionists. They believe there is an objective morality, moral realism. You can actually look at the Phil Surveys paper 2020, 2022, 2020, and it shows the consensus or what most philosophers believe about most things. Like 70% are atheists, 65% believe in objective morality, so not nihilism.
But again, that would still hold if this morality that we're referring to was an emergent property from simpler forms, correct? Like if it was just the nature of life to eventually that life cared about.
It depends on which view. Like in my view, strong emergence means that there's literally something that comes about, like is created, like a law of physics or something. That strong emergence means that literally something is created from those properties, not just that they result from.
So I would be describing weak emergence by that concept.
Yeah.
Is there anything against weak emergence? Because I'm willing to acknowledge it's like that title, weak emergence.
No, weak emergence is the stronger one. Is the one that's more accepted.
I was wondering, you had mentioned that most philosophers support moral realism.
Yes.
And it's my understanding that you base your moral realism on some type of fundamental field. Do the majority of moral realists also base it in a fundamental field, or what is their basis for grounding the moral objective?
All right, there's no consensus on what it is. There's a whole bunch of different theories. My view would be called moral naturalism, and you can read more about what moral naturalists believe. But there's just a whole bunch of different views on what morality is constituted by. No real agreement there.
See, I agree with you on that, but it's probably slightly less of a with regards to, like you say, I think original morality was probably just pretty about like in caves or something. They're just going through that, so the people they are friends with the way they live with. For some reason, you say the way they fucking live, but they stay with it after. It's just because it benefits themselves. I don't necessarily think there is a specific don't fucking kill the people and stuff. And I don't know. I think probably
Well, that's why I would disagree. I think that there is a pattern to morality, and if we look at like moral progress, I think if we look at moral progress and how societies change over time, the pattern is the same. So even though morality is different like 1,000 years ago, that's because their rate of intellectual acuity and technology and resources were decreased. But as you increase those things, you get the same pattern everywhere in society. So it seems like the pattern of how morality is changing is the same everywhere you go, and that's what indicates that it's probably more than just a social construction.
So this is what this was my issue before what I was asking about. So I think it's very hard to differentiate between, obviously like you say, it's very hard to know if morality would have developed in the same way without the social construct growing at the same rate, because you grow with social construct. So
well, that's why when we look at like animals, we can see that moral progress happens in animals too. Animal societies have morality just like human societies do. It's just not as developed.
Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. So I don't think human morality would have progressed to the point it's at now without the social constructs that have come in place with humanity. It's like, so that, like, let's say if you look at monkeys and if you chuck some fucking rabbits in with some monkeys, it's likely they'll kill all those rabbits. Because you know what I mean, so that's just what they're going to do.
Right, because their morality isn't as developed as much because they don't have the same level of intellectual acuity. But if they did, then they wouldn't do that anymore.
Exactly, but what I'm saying is I think it's hard to differentiate between if we would have got to the point of increased morality without the social constructs that we've come up with,
Well, I think it's the other way around. I think our social constructs follow our morality, not the other way around. So, like, if we look at religion, like Christianity, there's this new thing called progressive Christianity, where they're accepting of the LGBTQ community. Like, that's not from Christianity, definitely. It's something else. It's their ideas have changed due to how everything in our group have changed about what we view as moral, and then they change their social norms, their religion.